All right, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, today we are going to talk about the level 3 project management, right? We're going to start from where we stopped last time. Right. I believe we touched a little bit about monitoring and controlling. Okay, how you will be able to understand this concept very well. Remember the stages of a project. Can you still remember? I told you projects start from being initiated, from the initiation stage, right? After the initiation stage, what next? The planning stage. You must know the phases. It's very, very important because that is the key for you to be able to understand what project management is. After the planning stage, what next? You have the execution stage, right? Right. After the execution stage, we have monitoring and controlling. Then we have the closure. Right. You should be able to know that. So when we say monitoring, what are we talking about in essence? Right? Monitoring means observing. How many of you know how to drive here? How many of you know how to drive? Do you know how to drive? So when you are driving, by the time you were learning how to drive or your driver's license, what did they tell you? Guys, there's a mistake now. I didn't switch on this thing, but it's not a problem for this thing to rotate. Why is the okay? I hope yeah. You know, the first time you are doing something is okay. Right. I hope we are still getting it right. Okay. So yeah, when you are driving, when you get to the road, what do? Right? You observe. They say there's what we call blind spot. You know what is a blind spot? You need to observe carefully. Then they say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? You want to observe to make sure that you are on the right path. You want to make sure that there is no other vehicle that is coming that you can palm. In project management, it goes the same way, right? You must be able to observe to ensure that your project plan is being implemented according to how you plan it. Right. Remember, I told you a project plan is something that you intend to do in future. Right? You haven't started. Now, after the planning, you need to put it into reality. So, as you are putting it into reality, you must refer back to your plan. This is how I say I'm going to do it. You need to check whether you are still on track. Perhaps when you find out that you are not on track, what you need to do, you need to control. You need to make sure that you inject that corrective measures. That is what we mean by control. Right. We say monitoring and controlling. Monitoring is watching of what is going on. Did you see? You observe. This is what I say I'm going to do. Now you started doing it. You must make sure that you do what, am I doing the right thing? Because if you deviate from your plan, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to achieve your project objectives. Mind you, your plan has already been strategized, has already been structured in such a way that you believe that you are going to achieve your objectives. So your plan is your what we call a blueprint, right? It's a blueprint, is your GPS. You know GPS, right? When you are going to a place that you don't know, you rely on GPS to guide you, right? Now, when you are going off track, the GPS is gonna tell you, right, that you are going off track. It's the same thing. Your project plan is your GPS, right? Now you need to make sure that you stick to it. I know, obviously, there could be some instances whereby you need to deviate a little bit. Like you are driving now, right? The GPS will say turn right, turn left, turn right. So when you fail to turn, what is gonna happen? You can go to anywhere you like. So you're gonna reroute you. You know rerouting. Many of you have seen that. So in project management, when you discover that you are not doing according to what you planned before, you need to reroute to make sure you come back to track. That is what we are saying. That is the rerouting, right? From GPS is what we call control. You see, you need to infuse corrective measure by way of rerouting yourself to come back to track. Does it make sense to you? Right. Now, we said controller is making the changes to correct any deviation from the plan. Right? It's the same thing that I explained. Evaluating is one part of the monitoring process because when you are monitoring, you are trying to evaluate to see what, in the first case, what is an evaluation? Evaluation is a way of you trying to measure your performance against the set standard. Understand? That is an evaluation. You got certain standards that have been set. Now you are measuring your performance now against it for you to know whether you are doing the right thing. So that is still the element of monitoring and controlling. It's the same thing, it's part of it. Evaluation is part of monitoring and controlling, right? Then continuous process throughout the process. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop, right? Once you started the project, you keep on, you have to start observing, monitor, and control it from the beginning to the end. Once you finish your planning, you start executing the project. Throughout the execution stage, you need to monitor and control. Right? Your observation from, let's give this example now. Your observation for driving. It starts from the moment you get into the garage in your house, you ignite, right? Your car. That it starts from there. Till you go out and come back home. That is how it works. Project is like that. From the moment you start executing your project, you need to be monitoring and controlling it till you get done. Does it make sense to you? It's a continuous process. So a plan not monitored and controlled is unlikely to succeed. Right. You got your plan. That plan is beautiful, aesthetically done. Realistically, it's something that can be able to materialize. Right? But when it comes to reality, actualization, for you to realize that plan by way of implementation and execution. You don't monitor it. I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to achieve your goals. Because, mind you, when you were planning, let me put it this way, you were planning in the cloud. Right? Whatever you plan in the cloud now needs to be executed. Right? You are not God. It's only God that said, this is what is going to happen, it's going to happen. And mind you, remember when I was teaching you entrepreneurship, I told you about external force, contextual factors, right? Macro. Let me put in economics, we say macro environment. There are certain things in the context that are beyond your control. We can obviously affect your project. In the same way, there are certain things within your control as well, which you might not at the beginning think about. Because we are not Mr. Know All. You see what I mean? There will be some certain things that will crop up. We call them scope creep. I talked about it yesterday. By the way, you were not with me here yesterday. I taught here yesterday, right? You were not with me. I taught them scope, right? Scope creep and all those other stuff. So what it means is there will be some additional changes here and there due to taste changes in taste, changes, the client can say, I don't want this, I want this one rather. Or perhaps there is something you put there, material, that material is not available. You need to change. Okay, let me give you a simple example of your birthday party, right? Your birthday party is a project. Now you say, this is what I'm going to do. You plan ahead. This is what exactly you need to do. Now, for example, you've gone to buy the materials, right? For your birthday party, maybe clothing or whatever you want to buy. Now, when you go to the mall, you discover that that thing you had wanted to buy is not there. Let's assume there is a particular item that is missing, and that thing is nowhere to be found. What you gonna do? You need to make a change. Do you understand? So you need to observe those changes. Otherwise, if those changes are not controlled, you're gonna make your birthday party not to be realizable as per your project objectives. Right. So that is what we are saying. So at the end of the project, what happens? There is what we call closeout. Right? I've given you 5 phases of the project. The last stage is the closeout. So what happened during the closeout? Right? At this stage, you need to make sure that the project is finalized, the goals of the project, right? Once you've decided that, or once you have established that the goal has been reached, then the project is finalized. You close it. Because that is the main difference between a project and a non-project. A project must come to an end, right? A project needs to be executed within a specific period of time. And once that time has elapsed or comes to an end, the chapter need to close. You need to close the chapter. It's not a continuous process, right? So then, at this stage, it provides an opportunity for the project manager and the project team to learn from experience. Now you've done with the project. Right. You need to reflect, a kind of reflection in terms of what you've done. Have I achieved what I've set out to achieve? Right. And what have I learned from the project? Obviously, there will be some things that you've learned that you can keep to yourself or replicate. Replicate means you can put it again in practice when you've got a similar project. Right. If there are certain things that went wrong, that you could not do the way you're supposed to do it, then you know that next time you are going to improve on it. You see? So that is what happened there. Then it provides, usually conducted, when do you do? Usually conducted in the final meeting of a project. So what I was saying now is there is a kind of ceremony that is involved, right? At the closeout of a project. Because you need to go and look back, you know, have a kind of, we call it an evaluation, to see whether all the deliverables means the outcomes of the project are satisfactorily achieved. You see, so when you've discovered that all the deliverables outcomes are achieved, then you can call it a day by closing down the project. So perhaps during your evaluation to check whether all the outcomes are met, if there are certain issues that are outstanding, right? Those things need to be discussed. We say discussion of outstanding issues as well as what went wrong and what the team struggle with needs to be established. For example, questions asked during the closeout. What went wrong? Perhaps there could be certain things that were not done the way it should be. Right. Then you need to ask yourself what went wrong. Right? By knowing what went wrong, you can use that one to correct yourself in a similar scenario. Then you need to ask such questions as what could be improved? Right? What could be improved? Perhaps there were certain things that went wrong that could have been done in a better way than you did it. Right? But next time, if you are given such opportunity, if you are given such an opportunity, how are you going to improve on it? Do you understand what I mean? It makes you to be much more wiser now. You've done something, then you learn from there. Whatever mistakes that you made, you don't have to shoot yourself or be uh, dejected or be disillusioned, right? You know, I've made mistakes. Next time, when I'm given this kind of opportunity, I know what to do now to improve on it, right? Project management is a way of executing a project can as well make you to learn. That is why we say experience is the best teacher. You see, when you've done something, obviously there will be certain things that when you look back in form of reflection, you say, if I had known, I could have done it much better. Right? Then you keep that. Next time you are given the opportunity again, then from what you've learned, then you execute it. You put it into practice. Right. Then what did we learn? Obviously, what did we learn? There must be something that you learned from it. So if you've learned something that is good, you keep it. Next time you replicate it. Does it make sense to you? So project management is quite an interesting area. So that is the end of that topic. So the next topic I'm going to introduce you to, which is very, very important. Let me see, there's one thing I want to show you. Okay. We call it project management tools and techniques. Project management tools and techniques. Right. When you look at project management, there are certain devices that do assist project manager in improving or enhancing, helping the project manager to be able to do his or her job more efficiently and effectively. We call those things tools, right? I'm going to give you examples of tools. Then we got techniques again. Techniques refers to the procedures, certain procedures that the project manager to be specific, employs to make him or her to be able to do his or her job effectively. There are certain techniques being used by project manager, as well as certain tools that do assist project manager. So those are what we classify as tools and techniques. Right. As you could see here, we've conceptualized tool as a device that can assist in accomplishing a project. It helps project manager to accomplish his project. For example, now, like as I'm teaching you here now, right? You see, I've got gadgets here, right? These are devices. Obviously you know these are devices that is helping me now to be able to present my lesson, right? And record it so that next time you go home, you can visit the YouTube channel perhaps. Then you listen to it. Right. Like I told you, I went to invest money yesterday to buy all this stuff so that it will be clear, for me to be able to enhance the output. You understand what I mean? That is what I'm talking about. The same thing that is happening here. Then techniques. Techniques is a procedure used to perform an activity to produce a result. Right. Let me give you an example of a technique here now. Right. Ordinarily, there are some lecturers when they are teaching, some don't even have a projector, right? They're teaching, right? Okay. Now they don't have this kind of slide, let alone to be talking about recording. So I have introduced these techniques, right, of recording it so that we can have a kind of we can preserve what we are doing in the class, so to enable you to revisit what we have done. It's a way of enhancing the teaching and learning as the project management as far as my own area is concerned. Did you see? This is the techniques, the procedures I'm using, the methods I'm using to make sure that I deliver a quality work, right? So that is what we are talking about. There are certain techniques, procedures that the project manager is using to be able to do his or her job more effectively and efficiently. For example, there is what we call crashing. Crashing. Crashing means reducing the duration of a project, right? A project that was scheduled to take maybe 3 weeks. Now, maybe perhaps due to client requirement, the client want that project to be done much more faster. Then the project manager has to use that procedure, that techniques of crashing to reduce the duration. Either by, there are different ways to do that. You increase the resources, the use of resources. For example, if a piece of task was initially meant to be done by 5 people, you can put 7. Obviously, when you increase the number of people performing the same task, the duration is going to be reduced. So those are the type of techniques that we're going to discuss about, right? Then let's see examples of tools. We're going to leave techniques meanwhile. Let's talk about tools now. Let's focus about tools. Mind map. You know what is a mind map? You have seen that, right? But to you, mind map can help you for you to be able to depict, represent information that can make it more clearer to you or more clearer to your audience, right? Project manager, do you make use of a mind map, right? We say mind map is a graphical representation of information. If a project manager wants to represent information or depicts information clearly for people to understand, it can be represented in a mind map, right? Then it makes it much more clearer to the audience. Then change control system. What do we mean by change control system? Remember I told you that a project is something that have got a defined scope, right? A project have got a defined scope, right? But when you start executing the project, there is every tendency that, or there's, yeah, it's likely that the way you plan the project might not be exactly the way it's going to be done. What I mean is there could be some scope changes or there could be a scope change, as the case may be. Right. It's not bad to have a scope change in a project, but the question, the most important thing you need to focus on is how do you manage that change? How do you manage the change that will occur during the execution of the project? Right. So that is what we are saying. So we got a laid down procedure, right, on how to manage changes in the project. We got a form that needs to be completed. So that form itself is part of the tools that is assisting project manager to be able to manage changes in the project. Does it make sense to you? We're going to discuss in detail about that form, that template. We call it template, right? Okay. By hood. Then charter of account. Charter of account is a tool, right, used to track the cost sustained in a project. It's more or less like a bookkeeping, right? These days, there's a software to do that. All the cost, you incurred in a project, you input everything in the system, then you know the budget, everything is there. It will help you to calculate, you can be able to track whether your project is running in terms of if the expenses in the project is not getting running out of cost, right? Because you got a project, you need to make sure that your project, your expenses must be within the confinement of your budget. Once it goes beyond your budget, we call it budget deficit, which is not a good news for a project. So, no, no surplus. I said budget deficit. Deficit means short, right? Okay, let me explain to you what you are trying to say. For example, if your project budget is 5 million, right? Then eventually you executed the project, the amount you spent based on the final account happens to be 4.5. That is a surplus on that budget. right? It's a surplus now. But it's a good news, right? But if you, the project being 5 million and you spend 5.5, it's a deficit, right? Nobody like to hear the word deficit because nobody like to be in debt, right? Everybody like good news. Okay. So that is what we mean by that. What can help you to be able to track your expenses, the cost of the project? Cost sustaining the project means the expenses in the project. You use a charter of account. You got a master, we call it master schedule. We summarize all the deliverables and milestones in the project. Right. By now, you know what we mean by deliverables. Deliverables are outcomes that you intend to achieve by doing the project, right? Milestones is something that you set by yourself, right? We say milestone is something, it's at a point in time where you feel you've achieved something. For example, you can set, if it is a housing project, you can set a milestone on the foundation. When you finish with this foundation, you feel that you've achieved something, the superstructure. Okay. Let's say, for example, your NCV program. I told you it's a project, right? But you completing, for you now completing your level two, it's a milestone, right? You've achieved something. So you can set milestones at different position of the project. Then you will have a kind of a schedule, whereby because you can use that schedule to track your performance as well. Right. Then you have the ground rule, right? The ground rules. You know, in a project environment or in every project environment, that's what we call ground rules. Most especially where you have when you're working with people, right? If there is no ground rule, people can behave the way they like, right? For example, now, like in the school now, if we don't say lessons are going to start 8 o'clock, you see by 10 o'clock, people are still coming here, right? In a project environment, it's the same thing. Ground rules, there must be rules to regulate the behavior of people. You understand what I mean? So that document of a ground rule is a device. It's something that can assist the project manager. Right. Then a list of acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Then milestone schedule. Right? Milestone schedule is a summary of all the milestones of a project. Then you have the work breakdown structure. This one is very, very important. This one is very, very important. Right? Work breakdown structure schedule, whereby you decompose the project, the task that needs to be done in the project, right? You list them out in a hierarchical, as the case may be. Depends on how you pronounce it, but you know what I'm talking about, right? You take the project holistically as it is, then you identify first the major task that needs to be done. Then you break it down further into manageable work packages, the subtask. Then you arrange it in form of a tree. So that is what we refer to as work breakdown structure. It's very important for the management of a project, right? Because from there you know what needs to be done, right? Because if you are, for example, when you are estimating the cost of a project, you start from, you can use the work breakdown structure. Let's say, for example, if there is any item that is omitted in the work breakdown structure, and you base your scheduling in terms of planning out or in terms of strategizing how long the project is going to take. If you miss any item here, how are you going to make up for that item? It's going to be a problem, right? Let's talk about the cost. If any item is omitted there, when you are calculating the cost, obviously it's going to be omitted. Now, when it's time for execution, where are you going to get the money to pay for that particular task? You see how important it is for you to be able to know or to do a good job, if I may say, when you are identify the activities or when you are preparing your work breakdown schedule. Does it make sense to you? Then network diagram. Network diagram is a very important tool as well. And how does it work? It shows the sequence, the relationship between the project, the relationship between the task and the project. We say it's a graphical tool for showing the sequence and relationship between the task and the project. Because for you to be a good project manager, to be able to deliver a project on time, you should be very good in mapping out the sequence and the relationship between the tasks. Because there are some tasks that needs to start at the same time, right? There are some tasks that need to finish before other tasks takes place or commences. If you don't know how to sequence it, you just put them finish to start, finish to start, finish to start. A project that's supposed to take you 6 months will take you perhaps 2 years because you don't know how to sequence. Right. So based on your experience, if I'm doing this task, I can as well start the other task in parallel. When this task ends, as a preceding task. This is the succeeding task. You should be able to define the succeeding task that has to go along, that has to commence once the preceding tasks have stopped. So you need to, but based on your experience, you can be able to do that. It's very important. Then you have the computer project management package that can help you. We were using MS Project those days, but these days what is mostly in use is SAP, SAP. That is what they are using these days. This one now is becoming outdated, MS Project. So it's SAP, they're using SAP. When you go to the city of Cape Town, the city of Cape Town is using SAP. When you go to Public Works, all these things I've seen it. The website of City of Cape Town, they are using SAP. All these big government organizations, they are using SAP, right, for project management. So these are some of the tools that we can talk about as far as our lesson is concerned today. Then later we can tomorrow perhaps we continue from where we stop now. Right.